Welcome to today's Skill Up. My name is Emily Sprenger. I'm an academic learning specialist here at NU, and I am joined by Dr. Mary Streit today, who is one of our fabulous professors at NU. Today's session is recorded, and we will go ahead and post that in our Graduate Studies Support Center Skill Up page. We absolutely want you to ask questions in the Q&A function of the Zoom. You're welcome to have conversation in the chat. If anyone needs anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to me in the chat. And for now, I will turn it right on over to you.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for taking some time today. So what is Qualtrics? I know that's a weird word that I'm using. So Qualtrics is the name of the online survey provider. And I'm doing Qualtrics, but you should know there are other ones. There's SurveyMonkey. There's like a whole bunch of different ones that you can use. I use Qualtrics because I think legacy accounts here at the university, we had a partnership with them for many years. And I find them to be pretty professional and easy to work with. And I've also done some of my own survey research using Qualtrics. So I like them, but again, just be aware there are other online survey providers out there that you can use. Okay, so learning objectives, the first thing you want to do is you want to have your research problem. And I know for the dissertating students on the call, you know exactly what that's about, right? So you want to really focus on the problem only. So you don't want to have a lot of like other questions in there or things that are kind of tangential. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but you want to really have that focus in mind when you're creating your survey. Focus is key, right, everyone? For the dissertating students, I'm sure you learned that and you tried to do too many things and your chair said, do you want to graduate? Yeah, you want to just be focused. Okay, and then we're going to talk a lot about crafting survey questions and what are the kind of do's and don'ts there. Okay, so I'm going to spend some time there. And my goal is to help you to become familiar with the Qualtrics platform and to feel more comfortable in designing your survey. Okay, so now that you're into Qualtrics, you want to log in, go right ahead, be brave, go for it. And then click on projects in the main menu. Now the main menu, it's like those, there's like 3 lines. You want to, I think, right click on that or left click on that. You know what I'm talking about. And then you should have a list of options from the drop down menu and you want to click on projects.
And just for clarification, sorry, the menu is on the left-hand side.
Upper left, yes, thank you. And then you want to click on create projects, which should be, I think, in the upper right of your screen. It's like a blue tab. Does that sound right?
That is correct.
I'm looking to you for.
That is correct. I am. Yeah, absolutely. That is correct. I'm staring right at my screen as well.
Click on surveys where it says under from scratch. Meaning you're starting brand new. You're not looking at an existing survey. And then click on get started. And then provide a title, whatever you want to call it. We'll call it Fun with Qualtrics, whatever you want to do. And then how do you want to start your survey? You want to create a blank survey project. Now you can import questions and do things, or you can work on an existing survey if you want, but that's a more advanced kind of thing that you would do after your survey is created. Like it'll give you a list of projects you can pick up your survey. Say you finished halfway and you wanted to go back to it because you had other things to do, like you had to make dinner or you're meeting friends or whatever, and then you want to come back to it. So that would be, you wouldn't go here. You wouldn't go create projects. You would actually pull up an existing project when you're on the project's main menu. Okay, so it's going to ask you now for question types. You should see that on the left-hand side of your screen. And I think the most common question type is a multiple choice question. So with the multiple choice question, that's where you're going to have a question like, how much do you agree or disagree with the following statement? And then you choose the number of responses. So for example, if you're going to use like a 5-point Likert type rating scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, you would choose 5 responses. And then you want to put actual words for each response to kind of anchor them. Those are called anchored choices. And those are good to do. It's very clear that way what that actual choice means when you're doing your data analysis down the road. Okay. And then the other type that you can do is a text-based response. This is for the qualitative researchers in the room, which I know there are some. And for a text-based type question, you can allow a single line of text, a double line, meaning 2 lines, or an essay where they're going to say a little bit more like a paragraph or so. So the general recommendation from Qualtrics is that these are sometimes used, but not always recommended. Again, it depends on your audience, your sample size, things like that. When I did my research, I had well over 100 participants that I was recruiting into my study. And I did have some of these blank lines in there. Like, I think I had like a double line. And some of the things they wrote in there made no sense. I'll just tell you right now. And a lot of times they don't even put in any type of response. It would also depend on the length of your survey. So if your survey is lengthier, I think the general recommendation is you want it to be under 100 questions. So even at that, that's a lot. But if the survey is lengthier and then you're asking them to type in, you know, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What are your attitudes? Whatever. A lot of times people get tired and they get tired pretty quickly. And it's probably better for you, if you can, to think about how they're going to respond. What are some possible questions that you could ask to kind of help them to get to what you're thinking about a little bit more directly? So does that make sense? So it's kind of putting too much effort on the participant when you do it that way. Unless it's an intentionally qualitative study, then that's a whole different ball of wax. Okay, and then the other type of question is you can import from the library. You can use an existing survey. So if you're using, you know, some type of survey that's already been validated, you can import it there. Because it's just very general kind of information for you to know. But play with this a little bit and see if you, even if you do like a 5-item or maybe 2 or 3 items just for the purpose of this webinar today, I think it would be good experience for you just to kind of get a sense of what it's like. And I also wanted to add that at the end in the final reference page, there's a link to the Qualtrics like tutorial where you can go step by step through all of these different types of questions that you're having about the survey. And you can even get Qualtrics certification. I think it's like $100 or whatever, where you can put that on your resume that you are now Qualtrics certified. So I just wanted to share that with everyone because I saw that. I was like, oh, wow, that's new. But it's really good information. It's very easy to follow. So if you feel like you need more than what this session today is covering, I would direct you to that link at the end in the reference also. Okay, so best practices here for survey design: clarify what the problem is and focus questions on this topic. Keep it brief here. Don't include unnecessary or repetitive questions. You're not validating an instrument where you're checking reliability or anything like that. So less is more. Brief, keep it short. Have someone review the questions for you. Have somebody like pilot and take the survey and just test it and see. It could even be you, but it's probably better it's not you. Because sometimes when you're doing something, you can get too close to it that you miss, you know, what the way you word something for you makes sense, but to most people, they're like, what does that mean? So it's a really good idea to pilot the survey first. And again, the shorter the survey is, the better response rates, the less dropouts, and also the less likely you're going to have any bias, and your data quality is going to be better. Because people get tired. And when they get tired, what happens? They're not paying attention. They're just like, oh, get me out of here. I want to be finished with this. Okay, plan the order of your questions, narrow to broad or vice versa, and have some kind of logical blocking. If you have questions that are kind of similar, you want to put them all together also. And then typically you want to have any kind of demographic questions like age, gender, income, all that at the end of the survey. Does anybody know why that is? Just throwing it out there. I'm sure we have some people here who have an idea why that might be. There is a reason why. You always see them at the end, not the beginning. Just thought I would throw a question out there. See who's staying awake. Keep people awake and alert.
Someone
Because
said I was.
you eliminate biases from get-go. If you wait to the end to put those there, you eliminate that bias.
Yeah, there's something called stereotype threat. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. Where,
Yeah.
for example, if it's asking you questions about your mathematical abilities and you start off right away, it's asking you your gender and you're saying I'm female, that might initiate in you a stereotype threat, which is the misinformation that women are not as good as math as men. And that's actually not true. But because you're actually completing these questions and answering them before you actually go to the survey questions, it's going to activate that stereotype threat. And because of that threat, you're going to perform worse. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like priming all these stereotypes. So we ask them at the end instead. Now you can ask questions at the start of your survey as a screener. So say you're only looking for people who are over the age of 50, who live in this geographical area or something like that. You can ask them those questions at the start of the survey. And if they meet the criteria, they are allowed to then continue. If they don't, you will exit them out of the survey and say, thank you so much for your time and participation. So in that case, it's fine, but otherwise you don't want to do that. Okay, questions? Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay, so now the question wording. This is where it gets fun. I have done in my previous years a lot of survey research, and I've seen some horrible survey questions. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's no surprise that they found this to be true, because if you look at the questions, they're kind of leading the people right to those answers. So you want to try to word your questions a very neutral way, so you're actually getting at the truth. Because otherwise you're just wasting your time. It's just kind of an exercise in doing some number crunching. So the one thing is you want to avoid superlatives, meaning this is the best or this is the worst. So for example, DoorDash is the most reliable delivery service. That's not the best. Instead, you want to say DoorDash is a reliable delivery service. And then they might have to agree on a scale of 1 to 5. Does that make sense? You see the difference there? And then you also want to avoid absolute answers like always, never, because typically most things are not always true, or there's always an exception somewhere. So Uber is always a reliable car service. You can see how that can be tough to respond to. Instead, if you say something like Uber is a reliable car service, that's a little bit of a different type of question. And then you want to avoid double-barreled questions. I see so many people do this. This is where they have two things in one question. You have to really just ask about one thing at a time. So I have an example here. Whole Foods has quality produce and customer service. Two things, right? So you want to separate them to two separate things, one item at a time, one thing at a time. And then avoid leading question wording. This is what I see flagrantly often. So you have to be very neutral in how you go about asking questions. And again, this is why it's really helpful if you have somebody else kind of pilot and test it out for you, who's aware of these types of things, because they can say, that's kind of a little leading. So for example, how satisfied are you with our new and improved student dashboard? Versus how satisfied are you with the updated student dashboard? You see the difference? Very subtle wording, right? You see how new and improved sounds like, oh, that's great. Where updated is more neutral wording. So again, these are the kind of things you want to be mindful of when you're creating surveys and survey questions. Okay, and I have some more examples here of using multiple choice questions with anchored responses wherever possible. So here's an example. How often do you exercise? 1, frequently, 2, often, 3, occasionally, 4, rarely. How many of you have seen surveys like that? Show of hands, anybody? I have. I've seen lots of them. So an improved one, you would say 1, frequently, and then in parentheses, 5 times a week. You see the difference? 2, often, 3 to 4 times a week. It's a lot. It's what's called a behaviorally anchored rating scale. It's much more reliable, much more valid, and you're going to get better answers and better results, better data. That's what you want. Another example, do you drink coffee? Yes or no? An improved one, do you drink coffee? 1, never, 2, rarely. And again, you want to have those behaviorally anchored ratings kind of with each number. So when you're creating your responses, you can do that very quickly and very easily. And then you want to have follow-up open-ended questions as needed. So for example, if you have a question where one of the options is other, then you want to allow them to fill in the blank and kind of have a response to that. Okay, Wendy, go ahead. You had a question?
Yes, regarding the anchored responses, I'm assuming that if we're using a previously established validated scale, we
Yeah.
would want to use the wording exactly the way that they put it in the scale, correct? We couldn't add
Correct,
it.
unless you can have their permission to add those types of, they're called bars, behaviorally anchored rating scales, and they are the most validated way of creating these types of scales. But yeah, if you have the author's permission to make these types of changes, then that's a different story. But otherwise, you want to keep it as is, because you're going to be using that reliability and validity data is probably what caused you to choose that from the start, right? Yeah. Sherelle, go ahead.
Thank you so much. My 2 questions was, if I have something in Word, it would automatically convert in Qualtrics to a question. And the other thing, which is similar to, if I download a survey from NU's library, will it convert? Or do I have to now type each one, like kind of cut and paste and drop it in?
There should be a way that you can import it from the library. So from an existing data place.
Right.
So I know there's an option to do that. I have not done that specifically recently. So I would encourage you to try it and see. It might ask you to keep the formatting or to remove the formatting. So you might want to just play with it a little bit.
Okay.
I know when I did do that in the past, I had to kind of reformat some of the survey questions.
Okay. So it may be able to import it into Qualtrics, and I might have to tweak it a little bit, which is easier than having it complete the whole survey.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, and then the other thing just to be aware of, that Qualtrics can also perform focus groups for you in Zoom. So if you're like a qualitative researcher and you're looking to do more of a focus group, which I don't know if you guys know what focus groups are, but they're like a bunch of people come into a room. There's usually a moderator and they have questions they ask and they have a discussion forum. I used to do a lot of those, actually was on the other side of the mirror. We would do them with 2-way mirrors. And I was the researcher taking a lot of notes on the other side of the 2-way mirror. But Qualtrics can also do these focus groups for you, and they can also moderate them for you, which is a little bit better because they're more objective. However, there's a cost of that, of course. There's cost involved, so that's something to think about. But I just wanted to offer this to kind of give you guys an idea that you don't have to do everything yourself. Like you can actually go and they can help you and do it for you, which makes the data collection a lot easier. And they can recruit the participants too that meet your criteria.
And the Qualtrics we get from NU is the paid version, not the limited version, correct?
So that'll be why I would highly recommend that you reach out to the service desk if you're
Yes.
trying to set up your Qualtrics account as an NU student for your doctoral studies.
I have one. That's why I was asking, is it it's the full version, right?
It's got a better options. I
Okay.
don't know if it's necessarily the full version.
Okay, but it
And
has
then
more.
just also like to make sure that we have context here as well too. I know someone had mentioned a question about importing from a Word document or importing from the NU library. Keep in mind that you should be encouraged to double check the permissions on that, because not all surveys will automatically grant permission for academic use. So just keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important point. You always have to have the permission of the survey provider, always, before you can use it. Okay. So other things, page breaks, best practices, 1 question at a time per page. So if you have a 10-question survey, you should have 10 pages. The reason is it allows them to just focus on just that 1 question at a time, so they don't get distracted by anything else. Again, this is what Qualtrics suggests, so they know best when it comes to this. It's their platform. Display logic means you're going to show specific questions to a specific respondent. So based on how they responded to a question, like, I think here's an example, packaging to respondents that are in a certain geographic area. So you might only be interested in that 1 group, right? Does that make sense? Okay, and then skip logic is where you're going to use this probably at the beginning of your survey with informed consent, where you're going to ask them, you're going to have a whole statement, and do you consent to participate, yes or no? If they click on yes, skip logic will direct them to the next survey, to the start of the survey. If they click on no, skip logic will send them to the end of the survey where it says, thank you very much for your time and consideration. So skip logic tells you which question to go to. Sometimes you're going to have people who say yes get question A, B, and C. But people who say no just go to the next question. Does that make sense? And you can do that in Qualtrics. It's kind of fun. So you might want to try, to have 1 question in there where if they answer this way, it goes here, where if they answer that way, it goes to a different question. So have like at least 3 questions in there. Okay, now you're ready to preview your survey. So there's a preview button, and it will go through each question. And I encourage you to put in answers. Just check it, put some answers in. And if it's a fill in the blank, put in some words in there. I think there's some, I just learned this recently. There's some kind of like Latin phrase that people use to put in. I don't know what it is because I'm not a fan of Latin, to be honest. But they put it in there, and it's kind of like this generic like test response. But you just put in anything. And then when you're done, publish your survey. That's a really important thing to do. If you don't publish it, it doesn't save it. It won't be there for you. Okay, so to preview your survey at the top of projects page, let me back up a little. Click preview. And a browser tab will open showing your survey. And then answer the questions as if you're the respondent and test all the different possible pathways. Check that skip logic if you had put in any. And then publish. Don't forget to publish your survey when you're all done. Okay, and then when you first publish your survey, Qualtrics is going to have a link that they provide, which will take people to your survey. So you want to copy that link. And then what I recommend doing is just paste that into your recruitment email. Now, a little reminder here, if you go back and edit the survey, don't forget to publish it again when you're done. Because if you don't, it's just going to have the original survey without your changes. So you want to make sure after you make any revisions that you publish the survey again and you copy that link again. And I think when I did this recently was doing this, I think I probably did this like 10 times because I was making all these changes and we found errors and all this kind of stuff. So take your time here. It's important. It'll save you energy down the road. And I think that was it that I had just for the general information about the survey design. And then if you do decide you want to upgrade your account and you're working with the online survey provider, Qualtrics, I did have some recommendations for you based on an article that I wrote for Sage some time ago. I don't know, do we have time to talk? I think we have a few minutes, right? I can share briefly.
So sorry about my cough. Yes, and then if it's okay, I would also like to point everyone to the resources in the Academic Success Center for using Qualtrics as an NU student. So hopefully we have some time for me to share my screen and show students how to get there as well.
Definitely. Okay, this will be quick. So when you are working with Qualtrics, you are going to give them your survey. So you're going to give it to them in Word. Say you had 40 questions, so you couldn't use the free account. So you'll email it to them. This is what I did. And I'm like, okay, everything's great. Don't assume that everything gets transferred properly or correctly. Spend a little extra time here reviewing it, because I caught some mistakes when they did that. It happens, but really go through it and review it. And then also review it the day it goes live. Because sometimes the day the survey goes live, which happened to me also, there were some little errors. So just kind of make sure you're really staying on top of them. That would be my advice there. And then the other really important point is, and this is something I did not know until after I did a project some time ago, and I learned, and I said, okay, next time I'll do it differently. If you are reviewing the data as it's being collected, which I highly, highly recommend, and you're seeing, some of these responses, what they're saying is really weird. I think this is bogus. This isn't a good participant. Don't forget, they recruit people and they are paid to respond. Sometimes there are unethical people in life, a few, and they will just say, okay, I'll do it. And they just blah, 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 blah. They just type jibber jabber in there. And if you catch that, Qualtrics is obligated to replace it with a free and correct response. So in other words, they can't give you a bogus response. They have to give you somebody who is really true and answering. But you have to make sure that you catch it within 1 to 2 weeks of survey completion. I did not know that when I first started using Qualtrics some time ago. And then I found that out. So it's really a good idea to have some kind of strategy in place, maybe check the data every week, or depending on how many people you're trying to recruit, just so that way you're getting real responses. And if the data is looking a little iffy and you're getting, like I had somebody writing things like, oh, I love you so much. And I was like, really? It was asking them questions about how they feel about remote work. And they were kind of writing a love poem to me in this. It was very strange. So it was a very sweet poem and it was well written, but it was not what I was asking them about. So if that happens, you want to go back to Qualtrics and say, hey, can we have that response removed? And can you please provide a replacement? And they are obligated to do that as part of their agreement. So I just want to make sure you're all aware. And again, I recommend having those check-ins for that. Like plan them ahead, especially if you have a pretty big group that you're using. And I think that's it. And I did say, if you think if there's interest in this, I could do another session if you guys want on how to look at the results and how to because there's a way you can look at the results, you can combine the data, you can do a lot in there as well. There's my email. If you have any questions and you want to try to help, need more help, I'd be happy to help you. And then at the end, these are the links. The essentials for learning how to create surveys in Qualtrics in the actual course, and the getting started with surveys, Qualtrics in actual course. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to the course, and the course is free. The only fee comes into play is if you want to be Qualtrics certified, you have to pay, I think, $100, and I think there's a quiz. But if you do the whole course, I'm sure I would think the quiz would be very similar to all the materials in the course. So I would also direct you there. And then Emily has links for the NU resources also.
I do. I would love to share that. And if it's all right, I'm going to go ahead and just, before we dive into some of the questions, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully you can see my screen, question mark?
I can.
Okay, great. Is everyone able to see the Academic Success Center here? I'm going to go ahead and just take us a moment to make sure everyone knows where the NU starting place is for your student Qualtrics account. And when you're here in the Academic Success Center, I will put this link in the chat as well too. But just an easy way for me to find this, I just went to the Academic Success Center and put in Qualtrics in the search guide, and it brought me to this page. But for our NU doctoral and IRB related researchers, may have free access to Qualtrics through NU. So the first place is to email, and I will put this in here. I started with Service Desk as a student, and then they passed me over to the Office of Accreditation and Curriculum. But I provided this information, and then they sent me access to my free Qualtrics account as a doctoral student. And of course, with some of the resources and suggestions Dr. Straight provided today, there's also other resources here as well too, and the contact support option as well. So keep that in mind. And then using Qualtrics right here, there's a quick introduction, 5 minutes to introduction to Qualtrics, adding and editing questions in Qualtrics. And then, as Dr. Straight mentioned, there's that using skip logic in Qualtrics as well too. Some quick tutorials on how to do those parts of Qualtrics as well. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that I can pop those 2 links in the chat for you all, so you have access to that as well. And then there was one question in the... Some students, they've noticed in the comments, have paid Qualtrics research service to recruit participants. That's the QRS. Dr. Straight, do you have any suggestions on that, or are you aware of research or student experiences of working with QRS? You did it? Okay.
I did it. I paid them to recruit participants. I did a survey, like, this is a long time ago now, like, where people were not working remotely, but I wanted them to survey people who were working remotely for 20 hours or more a week. This was like in like 2016 or something. It was a long time ago. And I didn't think that many people were doing it then, but they were able to find them. So they were able to find those people and recruit them for me. And it did come at a cost per participant. So that's something to keep in mind. But the good news about it is once I said, yeah, sure, go ahead, here's the money. It was done in about a week. All the data were done, everything, it was recruited. So it's very quick and easy way to get the data done and the recruitment. It might cost you a little bit, but time is money. So it's really up to you to decide what works best for you. I think it's probably best to do it if you have more of a niche, kind of hard to find, targeted sample that might be a little bit more challenging. But again, if you are just like, you know what, I just don't have time, I want to get my data collection done quickly, I would definitely talk to them and get a quote, ask how much it costs. And if it's going to get your data collection done in a week versus you trying to keep recruiting and you can't get participants and you're like, I want to be done with this, it might be worth exploring. That would be my recommendation. And then the other thing is you can also have it be anonymous. So if you're worried about people don't want to be honest, and so they don't have to tell you who they are, and there's a way you can make it so you don't get any information about that also. But it can be a lot of fun, and I would encourage you to just play with it. And even if you want to just do like a 5-question one and just send it to your family for fun and be like, hey, just play with it a little bit and see if it works. And I think it will make it a little easier for you if that's what you're thinking about doing down the road.
All right, well, thank you so much. And if anybody has any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you all so much for your time today. And Dr. Straight, I appreciate you. And until the next time, I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Take care.